So willpower may help you for the first 30 days, but as far as kind of a strategy for long-term sobriety, there are better options and better choices that'll make it a little bit easier as we move through this. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what I call building a platform for recovery. And essentially there's going to be 4 pillars that we discuss as we move forward with this. But before we get into that, I just want to say that recovery is really kind of personal, and there is not a one size fits all. And so part of the process, I think, throughout my recovery, I know that I've looked for things that work for me, and then I got rid of the things that didn't work for me. So as I talk about these 4 pillars, we can start to build on those. And if you find other pillars that work for you, by all means, let's strengthen our platform by using those pillars. And maybe if ones aren't working for you, then go ahead and remove them. It's an ongoing process. What I know today is different than what I knew when I was sober for my first 30 days. And everybody's different. I want to make sure that you are developing your recovery in a way that seems to fit you. Today, we're going to kind of cover, why willpower may set you up for failure in the first 30 days. We'll discuss how to build a platform for your new recovery life. We'll talk about the 4 pillars of stability, which include structure, regulation, connection, and physiology. And lastly, we'll kind of go over some of those actionable things that you can do with each pillar to help strengthen it as we move forward and develop and evolve our recovery. So I know for me early on, I tried to stay sober with willpower, and that just didn't seem to work. The information that's out there now, there seems to be this piece that when we're using willpower, that it saps some of our ability. And so for a long-term strategy, it's not really great, because if I'm putting a lot of energy into willpower, eventually it's just going to get overpowered and overwhelmed. And that was kind of my experience. Is I could stay sober for a little bit just on willpower, saying I'm not going to drink. But long-term, it just was not a very effective way of dealing with my recovery. I think what I've learned, there is a certain point that there is a willpower, for lack of a better term, there's willpower that's needed. But really what I started to develop was a discipline. And by implementing discipline, I think that dovetailed with some of that willpower. It wasn't necessarily a strategy where I just was white knuckling it. I started to develop coping strategies and tools through discipline that helped me deal with my sobriety over a long period of time without having to rely on willpower. I think there are probably some times where I just needed to have a little bit of willpower, but as a long-lasting strategy, it just didn't seem to work for me. For overall, I think what ended up working for me is building this recovery kind of platform. Over a period of time, I started to implement and incorporate these disciplines, which helped me stay sober and helped me, again, evolve to a place where I was glad to be sober, that I appreciated being sober, that it wasn't such a fight to be sober. Today, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over each of those platforms and kind of tell you what I did on that day-to-day basis, and a lot of times what I'm still doing on that day-to-day basis in order to support that, again, develop that discipline, support that recovery, and it becoming kind of the main focus on how I am evolving and growing as an individual. Conceptually, if we think about our addiction, it's kind of like having a trap door. Don't know when it's going to get triggered, when it's going to drop. Addiction, it was cunning, baffling, powerful, and patient. And so I never knew when that trap door was going to open up and it was going to swallow me in. I think over those periods where I was struggling with the relapse, I would continue to kind of stand on that trap door, and I would do pretty well, but eventually something would happen and it would trigger it and I would drop in. So the concept is, what I want to do is I want to build a platform above that trap floor. So even if it does open, I'm still safe. I'm still above it. I'm still practicing these things that help keep me sober and keep me safe from relapse. What it does is it allows me to live life on life's terms and not full of fear, and being able to trust in the process and understand that just because my brain may say it's time to go drink, I don't have to listen to it. So the first pillar we're going to talk about today is structure. I think for a lot of us, we had gotten into a habit in the way that we drank. There was timelines, and there were certain moments where we would start our drinking. And leading up to that, there would be kind of a lot of triggers that were happening that were encouraging us to start drinking. And I think part of this structure now as a pillar is we've got to figure out what we're going to do with our time. Generally there are those 4 to 6 hours or whatever that is, maybe even longer, 8, 10 hours, where we had those drinking periods. So we're going to have to figure out what we do with that time. If we don't figure out what we're going to do with that time, then chances are we're probably going to revert back to that drinking behavior. You need to have some sort of strategy as we start to get into this recovery space where we're disciplined and we've got our time mapped out. It's not going to be good enough just to kind of say, well, I'll wait, and when I get to that, I'll have something. Because if you leave that time empty, eventually the addiction's going to fill it. Part of this structure, I want to talk about bookending. What that means for me is in the morning, I want to have established some sort of discipline or some sort of practice that I do when I first wake up. I want to not grab my phone and start scrolling. So in the morning, you want to claim your brain before the world claims it for you. So putting aside immediately getting onto some sort of social media or something like that, have something in place, whether it's I wake up and I'm going to do some morning meditation, build a strategy of I'm going to go make coffee and this is my ritual. For some people, it may be that morning prayer. Maybe it's time where you're going to read, or maybe it's time where you're going to do some yoga or some stretching. I know for me, it was kind of that morning meditation place where I got in the habit of when I would wake up, what am I going to focus on my recovery today? There are a number of daily meditation books that are out there that are really good, that kind of get you into this space where you're thinking, you're processing, you're taking a moment just to kind of reflect on what my day may be like and how do I want to interact with my day? What does a sober day look like? So that's going to be kind of the one bookend. And then the other bookend is what am I going to do at night? We talked a little bit about if I have this place where I drank from 6 to 10 or whatever that timeline was, I need to make sure that I'm filling that time with something productive instead. And I've already got it mapped out. I've got it mapped out a day or two. This is what my process is going to be. So you don't want to do the I'll see how I feel kind of place, right? So you need to have a plan. What does that plan look like? Is this going to be where you're going to go to a meeting? Is this where you're going to focus on something around the house? Is this going to be where maybe you've dedicated some time to listening to a sobriety podcast or YouTube? Again, I think we spend a lot of time drinking. Can we at least spend a little bit of time in our sobriety? And this is that dedication. This is that discipline, which can be really helpful. So what does that time look like? What am I dedicating my time to as far as recovery? And even if it's just an hour a day, this is the time when I used to start drinking. So this is the time where I'm going to dedicate that hour today to what my recovery is. So listen to a podcast. I read an inspirational book. I spend some time focusing on me. What do I want to be about? How do I want to change me? And really kind of dig into that. And then the rest of the evening then becomes something of focusing on fixing food, or I think exercise can be another good avenue to engage recovery type behaviors. Because when I'm doing that, I'm releasing some of those good neurotransmitters and alleviating some of those stressful ones like cortisol, which creates some anxiety. And if I'm able to either work out or go for a walk or even maybe go for a run if I'm feeling up to it, stimulate some of that brain stuff to address some of those stressful situations that maybe have occurred throughout the day. A couple things come to mind too as I look back on mine. I brush my teeth at least twice a day, right? So I would wake up in the morning and in the morning I would brush my teeth, and then in the evening I would brush my teeth. And I think this is a good time for implementing what I would encourage is just an affirmation. And so again, writing something on a card and sticking it on your mirror in the bathroom where you brush your teeth that inspires you. What that, I'm worthy of recovery, or there's a ton of them. You can go online and just kind of put in daily affirmations and find one that works for you, or maybe two, and put them on a card and attach them to your mirror. And so in the morning when you're brushing your teeth, you're going through that affirmation. You're reaffirming what's important for you. And then at the end of the day, again, brushing your teeth, maybe you're brushing them more than twice, so that's good too. But at least twice a day where I'm brushing my teeth at the end of the night before I go to bed, and I'm reaffirming, how did my day go, and reaffirming this idea of sobriety. And what it does is it kind of sets my day. So in the morning, I'm reaffirming it. I'm reminding myself that sobriety is important to me. And at the end of the day, I'm also reaffirming before I go to bed that yes, sobriety is important, and getting kind of fired up and excited about going through this. The other thing I'll say about this is I kind of view recovery as you get a mulligan, right? So you get kind of this do-over in life, and you get to kind of start fresh. And the beauty of it is I get to take those consequences that I had from drinking and I get to learn from those, and I get to incorporate all those lessons and kind of start my life over again. And that also means that I don't necessarily know what I like to do because I've been drinking and using that to babysit me or to occupy my time. Now that I'm sober, I don't really know what I like to do. But this is a great opportunity. So exploring some of those things that, hey, I'd like to try that. And it doesn't mean that you have to become an expert in it. I know for me, I decided that I wanted to learn how to play the guitar. And that was good for a month or two. And I realized rather quickly that I wasn't necessarily musically inclined. But I did explore it, and I did have a good time just kind of understanding it and researching it and then trying it out. But there were other things that I did decide to do, and one of them was going back to school. I thought that that was going to be important for me, and I was able to do that. I took up running, and I enjoyed that. So go and explore. Figure out what it is you like to do, because a lot of us don't know yet, because again, we've allowed alcohol to incorporate itself into our life and used it to manage us. And so it's a great opportunity to go try some stuff. And I certainly would encourage that. And again, that becomes some of that structural stuff that I'm now incorporating into my day-to-day. So the second pillar is going to be emotional regulation. With this pillar, what we want to try to do is, how do I regulate my emotions, or how do I really kind of learn how to essentially cool my jets when my emotions get heightened? There's the term called HALT, hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. And I would also put overwhelmed on that as well. So we're going to call that OHALT. So I've got overwhelmed, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. So when I feel the itch, I don't need to ask myself, do I want to drink? It really becomes, can I train myself? Can I discipline myself to ask, am I one of these 5 things? Am I one of these OHALT? And if I am, then let's address that. Let's take that emotional component out of it. If I'm working off of one of those 5 emotions, then a lot of times it's just coming from the reptilian part of my brain, that old brain space. And remember, that's automatic process. So it's just kind of running through, and it's not necessarily allowing me to kind of think through and ask myself what's really kind of going on. It just wants relief. By starting to train my brain, to begin to train it to ask the question, instead of, do I want to drink, what's really going on? A lot of times it allows me to override those oh-halt moments and implement something that's going to take me out of that space. So again, if I'm overwhelmed or if I'm angry, those two, typically the strategy is for me to take a little bit of a time out, to step away from the situation, to step away from what's going on and kind of recalibrate. And I need to kind of move away. You know, it's the old adage, when you're angry, you know, count to 10. Sometimes 10 wasn't long enough. Sometimes I needed to count to 100. You know, again, I needed to take my time out and kind of go regroup, refocus, ask what's going on, and kind of step away from that flash point, which typically is what's going on. I have that moment where that anger or feeling overwhelmed just gets there, and I'm like, and the only way out of that is I've got to drink. Those, again, it's taking a moment, stepping back. If I'm hungry, obviously, again, sometimes I'm not taking care or paying attention to what's going on, and maybe I'm missing meals, or maybe I'm not focused or paying attention on that stuff. So if I'm hungry, that's easily resolvable. We want to try to get some healthier options or opportunities for food. We haven't really been taking care of ourselves when we've been drinking. Having some healthy snacks, having healthy lunch, breakfast, dinner, you know, making sure that we're at least eating those 3 meals can actually address some of that hunger. Lonely, developing that support network. If I'm lonely, I need to make sure that I've got contacts that I can reach out to address that loneliness. And a lot of times it's about practicing, how do I talk? How do I engage? How do I talk about my emotions? The last one is tired. Big fan of naps. So if I'm feeling a little tired, maybe I need to just kind of take a nap or take a little bit of breather and just kind of have a little bit of downtime. So the next pillar is going to be connection. And this deals with, I'm developing some sort of safe harbor for me. One of the things that you can do, one of the things that I did was I identified who were some of those people that were closest to me, that actually knew what was going on. I know in that period where I struggled for those 2 years, I really didn't do that. I wasn't really honest with those people. There was a lot of fear that was involved, and I think that was just the way I protected, because if I told them what was going on, again, they maybe stopped me from drinking, and I wanted to be able to have that ability to go drink if I wanted to. And I think that, again, that was one of those shifts that was different when I got sober, is I never wanted to be in that space anymore. I left myself the out of being able to go drink if I wanted to. I needed to make sure, and again, I think that's a discipline piece, where I was disciplined enough that I was honest and spoke honestly about what was going on. And that became a huge issue, I think, for me. Once I was kind of able to establish some of that honesty, that really helped me getting sober and staying sober. And clearly, this connection really becomes important with the honesty aspect. I had those 3 or 4 people that I was really close to, and if something was going on, I was able to reach out to them and say, "Hey, I'm struggling with this. Can we have a conversation?" I think back on one of the blessings that I truly had was, there was a person that I got sober with. We were about on the same kind of level timeline wise. And so we engaged each other, and we found out that a lot of the stuff that we were kind of going through, we were going through simultaneously. And so it was really great to be able to go to a meeting with him, and then maybe hang out afterwards and just kind of have a conversation. "Hey, this is what's going on." He's like, "Oh yeah, that happened to me, and here's what I did," and vice versa. He would come to me and I'd say, "Yeah, this is what I did." And it was great having that ability to have that communication. I had an old timer that took me and this other person in. They would meet with us once a week, and he would talk about how he got sober and what he did, and would walk through some of the books that we would use in our recovery. And he would lay out and say, this is what happened with me. And it was one of the greatest gifts I ever got. But again, it was building that connection, building that community, that I wasn't afraid to go in and talk about and say, "This is what I'm struggling with," and not have that fear of, "Oh, they're going to look at me and think I've got 3 heads," or that somehow I'm that shame-based thing that's in the back of my head saying, "Don't talk to people about that because they'll think you're weird," or you're such a loser if you do. And I had to really kind of overcome that. And part of that was being honest and not being afraid. And again, fear was the one thing that consistently kept me drinking, and I needed to figure out how to not be afraid. Even early on, if you've got those 3 people, once a day, communicate with one of the 3, whether that's through a text or sending them a funny GIF or whatever that is, or maybe talking to them, right? What a novel concept. Picking up the phone and talking to somebody. Because what we want to get used to being able to do that, to pick up that phone and have that conversation. There was a saying back when I got sober that, that phone weighed 500 pounds. It was just so hard to pick up. But once I learned how to do that, once I got the discipline and practice that experience, greased the skids, and I was able to do that regularly and not allow that shame-based thing to come in there and start, that critical voice to come in there and start telling me what a loser I was. And I was able to kind of beat that back. And what I found was I was just like everybody else. I thought I was like terminally unique, that, oh, somehow I'm different than everybody, and that they're not going to understand. And the reality was they understand. They knew exactly what I was going through, and offered me some great suggestions based off their experience. So again, being able to reach out and have those contacts and those relationships really is essential in recovery. Now's a little bit different. I think since COVID, we've seen some of this stuff move more online. And I think clearly there's a benefit to that as well. I'm not sure that it completely covers all of those interactions that you would get to a face-to-face meeting. But I believe that, for those that grew up during kind of the social network component, that a lot of it is that interaction, and that's how we interact. And whoever that is, I would challenge you to find at least 3 people that you develop some sort of personal relationship with, that it's not just kind of this mask behind the screen, that you do get more of a relationship than just kind of checking into a meeting online and saying, yeah, I'm doing good. The last pillar we're going to talk about is physiological. So it's kind of hard to have a spiritual awakening if our brain chemistry is kind of trashed. What we're trying to do is we're starting to incorporate some of those healthier behaviors that encourage stimulation in our brain and overall that physiological kind of body, and incorporating activities and disciplines that help me reestablish a healthy body. Certainly one of the things that gets neglected when we're drinking is we don't generally spend a lot of time in the doctor's office. So having a good physical once we get sober, just to understand, okay, here's where I'm at, here's the reality, here's what's going on, this is the stuff I need to focus on. If I've been drinking hard and heavy for a period of time, my liver may have some damage. And it's not that it's not repairable, but I need to take care of it, and I need to make sure that I'm eating correctly and I'm doing those things that are going to help my body recover from whatever the damage that alcohol or drugs have done to it. The other thing we can start to do is, again, start to do some of that exercise. We talked a little bit about that in that first pillar. Just going for a walk, doing some exercise, doing some yoga, going to the gym, doing some sort of activity that will help release some of that excess adrenaline or cortisol that's been worked up in our brain, by being able to offload some of that by doing some exercise. If we're struggling with feeling like, oh, I just don't want to walk today. I've committed, I've disciplined myself, I'm supposed to go do this, I'm not sure I really want to do this. I'm just going to walk to the mailbox. And then I'll make a decision about if I want to go further than that. A lot of times once I get to the mailbox, I'm kind of in the mood, I'm in the groove now, and I'll go ahead and kind of finish that walk off. This becomes one of those disciplined places where I start to build this idea that just because I don't want to do it doesn't mean that I shouldn't do it. I know in early recovery for me, one of the things that I tried to commit to was whenever I had to make a decision early on, I just kept it really kind of black or white. And that was, is this going to take me closer to a drink, or is this going to take me farther away from a drink? And I really committed to those things that were going to take me farther away from a drink, or what I thought was going to be farther away from a drink. And it seemed to work quite well. This becomes kind of that discipline place, because a lot of times the stuff I wanted to do was the stuff that was going to get me closer to a drink. But I learned that just because my brain tells me something, or just because that critical voice tells me something, I don't have to listen to it. So part of this physiological stuff is just re-engaging our body, making sure that we're trying to be as healthy as we can, that I'm eating healthy, that I'm exercising, and I'm starting to feel good about myself. The addiction can hammer at our self-esteem. And just by going out and doing a little bit of exercise, just going out and eating correctly, feeling good about, look, I'm really kind of committed to this, I'm really doing this. It empowers me, makes me feel good, builds that self-esteem. Just being physically active in early recovery, and even throughout recovery, but being physically active in that early part really does send a message to myself, even when I don't want to do it. And that message is my recovery is important. And because my recovery is important, I'm important. And that's gold. That is gold. So do those things even when you don't want to do them. And again, it's interesting, we talk about this willpower component. And we mentioned earlier that, willpower maybe becomes part of it. But I think willpower gets replaced by discipline. By having the discipline and doing those behaviors that I know are going to be focused on recovery, kind of then replaces that willpower place. And I have these disciplines, I have these strategies, I have these tools now that are really focusing on recovery. Incorporate these pillars that I've now started to incorporate in my recovery that I rely on, and I believe in them, and they come in and take the place of that willpower. If you have the structure, if you have the regulation, if you have the connection, you have the physiological, we're relying on that instead of our willpower. Well, we have that platform to catch us, and we're not standing over that trap door just waiting for it to kind of spring on us anymore. Even when it does open, I've got these things in place now, which are going to help me from falling down into that relapse. So recovery isn't about what you've given up. Recovery is really about what you're building. And so let's build this platform. Let's build it strong. Let's build it to what you think is important. Let's build it to those things that seem to work for you. So my call to action to you is, which one of those pillars for you is maybe your weakest? And how can you shore it up? So if you've got an idea, if you've got any thoughts, please put it in the comments. If you like this, please hit the like. If you want to join the community, please hit the subscribe button. I appreciate you all being here. And until next time, you guys have an awesome day. Be safe, and we'll talk soon.